Good afternoon. My name is Etty Dolgen. I am the IAC Chicago chairperson. The session is entitled Creating Strong Jewish Leaders. In my professional life, I aim to create strong leaders from a very young age. I'm a principal of an Israeli Hebrew immersion preschool and after school, starting at 9 months for mostly American children and Israelis as well. We speak only Hebrew, no English, every day, all day. Growing Jewish young leaders requires fostering a strong sense of identity, community, and responsibility. Key elements include providing a deep understanding of Jewish history, values, and traditions, and to instill a sense of purpose rooted in heritage in our culture. In preparing young people to be leaders, we nurture critical thinking, ethical decision-making, and community service while promoting values like tikkun olam, repairing the world, and expose the young leaders to mentors who are inspirational role models. This session was sponsored by Mosaic, and I want to thank Alyssa, who is here. Alyssa? Okay. Is with us today, who is representing Mosaic. Thank you, Alyssa, so much. We'll hear from the distinguished leaders on the panel, which Alex Traiman, our very experienced moderator, will introduce. Enjoy the panel.
Good, so experienced that I didn't turn it on before we started talking. Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to be here. Yeah. I think we understand, all of us, that there's a significant need today, even more than ever, for strong Jewish leadership. Some of us are looking around and seeing that there's a deficiency, maybe, in Jewish leadership. We have great leaders on the grassroots, ground level, in social action, in politics, in religion, but today we don't have those great generational leaders of tens of thousands and millions, people that are uplifting the entire nation. And to that extent, we're seeing great divisions within the Jewish people. We're looking for unifying forces. So we thought that today we would come together and bring together some unique panelists that have a lot of experience, either in stepping to the plate when challenges presented themselves, like Talia at Cornell University, and Gidi and Len and Aya, who have spent decades actually working on developing Jewish leaders, which I think has gotten the Jewish community to where it is today, and giving us collectively the tools to identify the steps that we need to take now, especially after October 7th, in terms of developing a new generation of Jewish leaders to meet a new subset of challenges that maybe we didn't predict we'd have to deal with beforehand. So I'm just going to jump right in. I'm going to start with Gidi. You know, you've written. You wanted to go last, hear what everybody else said first. You've written a bit about creating a legitimacy surplus for the state of Israel, which, I mean, and you can explain it, but I think what that means is you're having leaders present Israel in such a way that when Israel has to do the things that it needs to do in the hard times, that it already has built up some kind of a surplus or a credit of legitimacy. I wanted to know if you think that after October 7th we're now in a legitimacy deficit, and what do you think that Jewish leaders today need to do in order to rebuild that surplus?
So first of all, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and with the IAC in this conference, and thank you for the, sorry, Mike. Now it's better. Yes. Mic problem, not Gidi problem. So first of all, thank you very much. It's great to be here, and thank you for a fantastic question that invokes this concept of legitimacy surplus. You have to kind of introduce what this concept means. We all know that in history, going back to the days of the Torah and throughout we've seen, don't worry, I'm not going to describe 3,500 years of history of anti-Semitism. We're seeing the evolution of anti-Semitism, which roughly, when the state of Israel came into being, took a new form that focused on singling out Israel and delegitimizing Israel. We had the Arab League boycott, but when that collapsed, somewhere in around 2000, comes the Durban conference, and we're seeing this new coalition between radical left-wing groups and Islamist groups that are basically working to delegitimize Israel. The delegitimization of Israel means a political, economic, and a political, economic attack, an attack on the political and economic and security model of the State of Israel with the goal of bringing about its implosion. Remember that this delegitimization campaign came into being after the Arab side was frustrated with all of its effort to destroy Israel physically. So now the attack was on the political model of Israel. The vision was to bring about its implosion. I won't go into all the details, happy to do it in some other forum, but what is important is that we, my team and I, at the Reut Institute, we identified that this is creating legitimacy deficit, as you said. Okay, they're chipping away on our legitimacy in many different places, and we see it now everywhere. We see it in America as well. We see it on campuses. I have to say that the first time we saw this red-green alliance between the far left and the Islamists was actually in London, and this is a phenomenon that gravitated from London through the Bay Area and basically spread around the United States. So the idea is, to fight the legitimacy deficit, to fight the delegitimizers, the anti-Semites, the BDS, you have to be hitting, okay? Lawsuits, aggressive, tackling, blocking, etc. But at the same time, you can balance this by creating a legitimacy surplus, which is what Alex asked about. The way you create legitimacy surplus is totally different from fighting the legitimacy deficit. In fact, I always argue it's even not the same people. The people who are very good at hitting are usually not that good at hugging, and vice versa. Okay? So what do we mean by hugging? What we mean by hugging is establishing long-term personal relationships, what we call in the American Jewry community relations, but long-term personal relationships with other groups that have the tendency to support us. Okay, roughly speaking, again, numbers pre-October 7, you had 3 to 7% anti-Semites, you have 16 to 25% pro-Israel, pro-Jews, you have 66% in the middle. This is the open space that we can work with. Obviously, within them, they kind of spread, let's say, between those two directions. So the key issue when it comes to legitimacy surplus, in our view, is relationship building. Strategic relationship building with emerging, appointed, and elected officials, community leaders, etc. And that's actually something that I've been doing a lot in the last few years, and I think this work is very important for the entire community.
Thanks, Gidi. Talia, you've been on Cornell. You were the student leader for Cornellians for Israel. You graduated in May. You've been speaking to birthright groups and at foundation events. And you've been dealing with the challenges of post-October 7th reality on university campuses. And I think everybody was surprised about what has happened, or maybe not totally surprised, but we saw how quickly, all of a sudden, everything escalated. And that's opened up unique challenges for students and also for opportunities for students. And I think you're one of those students that you were on a leadership track before, and you stepped up to the plate, but also we're seeing now other students that maybe weren't on a leadership track before that recognize the challenges, the opportunities, and step to the plate to establish themselves as Jewish leaders and to meet those challenges. Can you tell me a little bit about what you've seen on the campus, how different students have been triggered to take the challenge, and what the role of the intimidation on campus actually plays in the psyche of a Jewish student? Try that other mic. Let's see. Try the other one. See if it works.
Is this better? Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, good.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alex. And I think you touched on a couple of really important things that are worth speaking about. I mean, it's no secret that since October 7th and long before, there has always been this anti-Israel bias that's been present on campus, both in the social sphere and in the classrooms. You have professors, administrators, and students espousing vile anti-Semitic propaganda and receiving zero accountability from any administration about any of it. And it was only heightened after October 7th. We saw daily protests, graffiti calling for the elimination of the Jewish state and every single Jew inside of it. We saw the complete normalization of professors saying that they were exhilarated and energized. That is a direct quote from a Cornell professor by the October 7th Hamas attacks. And that same Cornell professor is still teaching students to this day. So there is a complete normalization of anti-Israel and Jew hatred. Whereas with every other ethnic group and nationality, there are such boundaries, but anyone can say whatever they want about Jews. And I think something else you touched on that's really important, particularly for this panel, of how we can build strong Jewish leaders, is kind of assessing where we are right now and then building realistic goals on how we can get the next generation to the point where they can fight anti-Semitism in a realistic and sustainable way. Because something Jews love to do is come with many, many opinions and create all of these big, massive goals, and they're so awesome, but then it's really hard for us to deliver on them. And so I think our community's responsibility in this moment is making a very clear understanding of where our organizations are at and what we can do to strengthen them and what we can do to empower Jewish students. Because it's not realistic that every single student is going to, visit the White House, but it is realistic that every single student will have a firm understanding of their Jewish identity, why the state of Israel is important, and the fact that it's a Jewish indigenous homeland. And it is incredibly unfortunate that so many students don't have that grasp. And so we need to be investing in our Jewish organizations that affirm that Israel is the Jewish indigenous homeland. Organizations like Birthright and Hillel and organizations that teach Jews who they are so that they can go and tell 2 friends or 4 friends why the state of Israel is important and why they shouldn't be listening to the vile anti-Semitism that they're hearing on campus, unfortunately.
Len, one of the reasons why I'm so glad that you were assigned to this panel is, while each of us have our experience in developing leaders, working with leaders, you've studied the research, you've done the data, you've polled extensively, and you're able to see by the numbers what works, what doesn't work. I would like to hear a little bit about what you feel the role of experiential programs is in developing Jewish leaders. And we also talked about a really interesting concept earlier today, which is called leadership by followership. Right? So if you can please tell us a little bit about that concept and how it ties into the experiential programs.
So thank you. I'm a social psychologist, so we think about the dynamic between leaders and followers. And what is clear today is that we need followers, in some ways even more importantly than we need leaders. And one fact deriving from some of the research that we do, if you look back 5 years to college campuses, and I'll focus on college students and the development of the next generation, but if you look back to 2019, the fall semester, you probably had nearly half of the Jewish students on any of the 200 or so campuses that Jewish students are most likely students at. The 50% of them, close to that, had some kind of Israel experience. They had been to Israel. They knew Israelis. They had some sense of the map. They had some sense, I think it's of Am Yisrael, not just Medinat Yisrael. And you compare that to this fall, and that number may be, or that proportion may be half of what it was. The generation of students on campus now are the generation who went to high school during COVID and may not have had an opportunity to travel to Israel. Taglit, which I've worked with now for 25 years, wasn't able to send as many people as it did. And in fact, we have a short-term problem. We have the problem of who is going to speak up on campuses and talk in some fact-based, accurate way about the situation in Israel. And we have a long-term problem. What will the generation who missed some of the opportunities that previous generations had to engage with Israel, what will they be like? We've been doing an experiment now for many years, comparing people who go on Taglit and people who are similar to them. We statistically adjust to make it so that they are similar to them. And what we can see is that a seed planted in college through Taglit, but it's also clear through other programs that people engage with Israelis, engage with Israel diaspora youth, not just in here in the United States, but around the world, that they live different lives. They're on a different trajectory in terms of engagement with others. And there is a crisis now, there's a crisis on campus, and there will be a crisis in the future if we don't do something to redress the current situation and figure out some way in which we can get our young people not just engage with Israel as some abstract concept, but engage personally in their kishkis, in their cortex, in their heads, in how they live their lives.
Well, Aya, it's special to have you on the panel, not just because of your role here in developing Jewish leaders, but also because you're the Chief Programming Officer at the IAC. So everything that you see going on here, Aya's had her fingers deep in putting this together. And it's really an incredible conference, and it's important, I think, so important for Jews to come together at this time and to do what we're doing, which is to engage and also to smile and hug. You know, it's very important. So thank you for putting on an incredible conference. You've written recently about developing Jewish leaders, a piece that was entitled "Even Moses Needs Training." Right? You know, here we are looking to Moses as the epitome of Jewish leadership, and you said even he needed to be trained. And you also talk in that piece about how overcoming adversity is a key prerequisite to developing leadership abilities. So how do we manufacture Jewish leaders? You know, what training do they need?
So I think that one of the things that I like the most about the IAC is that we have multiple entry points for becoming a leader. And we started at a very young age with just a Hebrew program and Israeli cultural program. And why do we do that? Because we want kids to have the backbone of something that they feel in their heart, not just that they know in their mind, because a lot of things and a lot of people and a lot of platforms will try to mess with their minds at a later point. But we want their heart to be in the right place, to at least know to ask the questions and know that there are some things that are just an absolute truth that no one can move them from. And the other thing is that we have, and you will see around this conference, we have more than 600 people here who are 18 and under. And we give them not just the opportunity to just enjoy this beautiful summit and the programs, but also we put them on stages. So you will see them today at the plenary, you will see them tomorrow as well. Where else would a 16-year-old boy can interview Michael Oren about how he became who he is? Where else would you see a 16-year-old boy interview Amital Or, the Olympic medalist, talking about her, role and her Israeli-American identity? So we give them platform and an opportunity to not just think about how they become leaders, but actually be leaders. And it takes time, and it takes training, and it takes, the opportunity to be there and fail and do good and do not so good. And I think that is what it takes. It takes someone to believe in them and find a lot of opportunities for them to experiment with what it means to be a leader.
Thank you, Aya. Gidi, you've also defined yourself as a societal entrepreneur. And we're in a period now of the rapid advancement of technology, where social media has taken over in the dissemination of messaging. All students are deeply engaged in social media. Now we're seeing the next level with AI, with artificial intelligence, developing messaging, and in some ways making communication more challenging, in other ways making communication much easier and much faster. So I wanted to know, what role do you think that technology, AI, social media, how does that have to play into the development of Jewish leaders and the challenges that they now face?
So I'd like to first of all suggest that when we say leadership, we speak about a lifelong journey. Because there is a sort of a tendency, say leadership, immediately we speak about 16-year-old, college, etc. But actually leadership is a lifelong journey. And the testament is that this organization, ISC, was actually founded by people who were in their 50s and 60s. So it's not some young people who thought about the ISC, it's actually older people.
Right, and Moses was 83 when he first started.
Yes, Moses was 83 when he was challenged to a 40-year journey. And so I want to say, I want to suggest that for the sake of my response to your question and also conversation, let's assume leadership is a lifelong journey. The second thing I want to say is that this is a moment of great transition. And the transition here is not just because of October 7 and all these things. There are huge narratives that are being transitioned. Israel is 75 years old. The Holocaust is 78 years away. And the identity of American Jewry and their foot forward in America was based on the Holocaust and Holocaust education and Holocaust training and so on. And the other thing that was, I believe, not emphasized enough is Judaism as civilization, the tremendous contribution that we have made to humanity throughout history. We have a great record of contribution in history. And unfortunately, when I look at my daughters, when they graduate a Jewish high school, one of the primary Jewish high schools in America, Frisch, they know a lot about the Holocaust, they know about Poland, they barely know anything about Jewish civilization, which is the strongest card that they could bring forward in American society and in any society decades into the future. But even worse in my view, they don't know about American Jewry. They have little clue if Jews came here 40 years ago, 400 years ago. If there's 5,000 Jews here or 5 million Jews. And I'm saying that a community that doesn't stand up for its own legacy is really in trouble. And we should ask ourselves, how is it that in the best schools in America, Jewish schools in America, there is inch-deep understanding of our own history here. 2054 will be 400 years since Jews came to America. Okay, it's coming up. 2026, America will be 250 years old. Every minority in America will ask themselves, what will tell their story? What did they give to America? What will be our story? Where are the tools to build this story? So what I'm saying is, when we're thinking about tools for Jewish leadership, part of it is owning a narrative that is, in my view, as an Israeli, even much bigger than Israel. It's a narrative of thousands of years and huge contributions to humanity. And Israel is the last chapter here over the last 75 years. So from there, I want to speak about technology. The issue to me is not this technology or that technology. We all remember, some of us, there was Walkman and then whatever, and now iPod, and then, now it's Spotify. Things are changing all the time. So it's not about the technology, it's about the agility to cope with technological change. We're seeing an acceleration in the pace of change. We're seeing a change in the nature of change. So what do we need in order to cope with the change in the nature of change? It's not going to be a long answer, I promise you. We know that what works over time is the basics, the foundations, because they stick with you for decades. Every technical solution that we will create for one technology or another technology, next year over, technology is gone, solution is no longer relevant. But when you have the basics, it can be with you for a long time. So my kind of approach to this is really emphasize and invest in the basic. The last thing I'll say is that the most resilient way to organize people is as a network of small units. This is kind of the self-evolving societal mechanism that has ensured the resilience and the recurring prosperity and the permanent leadership of the Jewish people for thousands of years, and it's ours, and it will continue to deliver amazing results for us. So, to me, the way to deal with resilience, to grow resilience, is to actually nurture our communities. Our communities are the building blocks, the interconnection among them. That's how we move forward and we face whatever is coming, because we don't know what's happening. So we need the resilience and we need these foundations.
Thanks, Gidi. I think it's a really important point that you raised. I'd actually meant to bring this up at the beginning. Really, when you look at almost all sectors of humanity, the Jews have naturally risen to the top leadership positions in almost every field. Statistically, probably more so than any other peoples, right? So, Len, I want to turn it back to you and to ask statistically, what are those building blocks that have allowed Jewish people to, is it just intelligence, is it just talent? What are the building blocks that you've studied, that you've seen, that help Jews to get to the tops of their respective fields, near the tops? And also, just to turn it a little bit, because we're going to open it up for Q&A soon, how does adversity, how does anti-Semitism, how do other challenges, accelerate these latent, let's say if DNA makes people more likely to become leaders, a lot of times in order to get them there, something has to trigger it. What are the triggers?
So I wish I knew all of them, and I would have the Nobel Prize, plus make some change in this world. But let me put it in a little bit of perspective. Every time I hear something about Jews and their tremendous contributions to the world, I think of Mark Twain, who in 1899 writes an essay answering somebody's question about why is there anti-Semitism? And he writes, I don't understand it. Jews are they're one drop of sand in the universe, and yet in every field they have made their mark, from science and health and so on. And he has a line in there, people don't talk about it a lot, but he said he'd been in Vienna and had met this guy Herzl. And he said, and he has this crazy idea that the Jews should come back to their homeland. And he then has this line that I will paraphrase, and it was something like, wow, world, look out if that happens. Meaning, and he meant it in a positive way. He meant that the world would be a different place. And in many respects, 75 years after this project formally started, Israel has made a difference. And we have to help people understand that. For the most part, Jews are regarded in America extremely positively. We were, until recently, the most positively viewed ethnic religious group in the country. Very surprising, because we're only 2.5%, a little over 8 million individuals. And maybe part of this is jealousy. I agree with Gidi that we need to think of both lifelong learning and lifelong opportunities for education. It is never too late. It's never too late for a leader to come forward. But in some ways, from just an investment standpoint, the earlier you get somebody in a leadership position, the more time you have for that person to make an impact. And I'll say one final thing. At Brandeis, along with running research projects, I also chaired, I'll just real quickly.
Let us pull it a little closer.
I chaired the Hornstein Jewish Leadership Program, training young Jewish leaders. And there were two things that I did and I think were were important and part of what it makes. Number one is that we put a lot of emphasis on experiential programs. Every year we took students to Israel for at least 2 weeks to engage directly. We also took them to other Jewish communities around the world. We originally were taking them to Eastern Europe, and then I decided, why show people how bad it was in the past? And then I took a group to Buenos Aires, to a different kind of community. And that, to this day, has had profound impact on them. The second thing that we did is to give them opportunities outside of the Jewish world. Some of them were getting MBAs and doing projects in how hospitals worked. Some of them were doing internships in non-Jewish settings, because part of leadership was developing a broad range of skills and developing the skills unique in some ways to the culture that they were working in, the U.S. In particular.
Talia, I wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on the campus. Obviously, immense challenges, as we've discussed. And we've definitely seen some students really rise to the challenge and stick up for the state of Israel and do what's necessary to galvanize the community. We've also seen many Jewish student leaders actually go to the other side, so to speak. And you've seen how some have participated in events put on even by Students for Justice in Palestine and others. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about these dynamics on the campus, and also how, in general, the internal political dynamics on the campus are affecting Jewish students, and how that's potentially harming the ability to channel students in the right direction, and to talk a little bit about the need for unity among students.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's no secret that things on campus are very intimidating. A lot of language can be very intimidating, and when someone comes after your identity, it's really, really hard to stick up for it when everyone around you really believes that it's horrible. And so unfortunately, as you mentioned, Alex, a lot of students, even those who grew up in Jewish families and Jewish homes, begin to even pander to the other side, to participate in anti-Israel rallies. And that's very upsetting for me to see, as someone who was raised in a Zionist home, for someone who was sent to 13 years of Jewish day school. And so I definitely did ask myself, what separates the students that stayed strong on their identity from the students that grew up in a Jewish day school in an Israeli atmosphere, but yet decided to support SJP? And I think it really begins with the home and parents affirming a strong Zionist sense of identity in a student, to the point, and this is the critical point, to the point where they're able to go off into the secular world when they leave their bubble, when they leave their organizations, and they can bring their identity with them. And I do think that we place a lot of emphasis as a community on identity, but as Gidi said, I don't think we as a community place enough emphasis on taking that identity and going into the secular world. And I think that's so important, because, I mean, it's in the Torah, being an Or Lagoyim, a light amongst the nations. We need to not only teach our children to be extremely proud of who they are, but we need to teach them to not be afraid of telling that to other people. And the students that are pandering to the other side are the same ones that are very afraid to stick up for their identity in the secular atmosphere.
But some of them are also at the same time looking for leadership, right? They want to take an advanced role. Right? So how do we use that?
Some of the SJP,
even the ones that are,
students,
you see that they're becoming activists for the other side, right? They're actually stepping up in a leadership capacity, but it's not channeled properly.
No, absolutely. It's very upsetting to me, because it's a complete investment in someone's identity, and then you send them off to college and they become the exact opposite. But I really do think there are some people that are looking for a sense of belonging, and when they are confronted with so much hatred, they kind of give in to the pressure. And so it's really teaching your child to stick out and to be confident in sticking out, because the primary thing above fitting in, above belonging, is their identity.
It's a perfect transition because I know that you focus so heavily on the identity piece, especially at IAC. And I wanted to know what role you think that Israeli Americans can play in stepping up to fill the leadership vacuum, and specifically now as you're engaging more with second-generation Israeli Americans, and even to a certain extent, I guess we're now starting with third-generation Israeli Americans. How do we make sure that they have the strength in their own sense of identity in order to help them to meet these challenges? You know, what role do parents play and grandparents play in enforcing that?
So I think Talia touched a little bit about the role of the parents, and I want to say that just as they say it takes a village to raise a child, I want to talk and expand a little bit about the role of community, because parents, sometimes they want to do a lot of things and they will send their kids, and we know it from the American Jewish world as well, right? They send the kids to Jewish schools, and then after the bar mitzvah, there's nothing left, like for, okay, what's next? So we put a lot of emphasis about what is happening in the home, and we try to bring IAC into the home as well. So they don't have to come to an IAC program. We have online programs as well, both for Hebrew and Israeli identity and the holidays and even Holocaust and Israel 101 education and all those things. But I think the game changer here is that we tie it into the community. We are not doing it, it's not each family to their own, we are all doing it together. And I can say that even on campuses, when you ask about the role of Israeli Americans, we did see that after October 7th, a lot of Israeli Americans took on a lot of leadership, even on campuses and in communities, because it touched a very deep point in their hearts, and they had to do something. They didn't know what to do, but they knew they wanted to do something and to challenge the energy and the anger and the sorrow. So I can tell you that this relationship with the community is something that I think is very important in helping those young people and the students to actually flourish as leaders, because they know that someone got their backs. And because we have communities all around where there are campuses that are problematic, we were able to bring the community to the campus. So we brought them to UCLA, we brought them to MIT, we brought them to help at Harvard, we brought them into Stanford. So every place where students felt that they are alone and they couldn't find, they felt that they're too small of a group, we brought community in. And I think that creates a sense of belonging that helps you be more secure in trying to create change.
Gidi, I want to be very careful here because I'm about to step very close to the third rail. Okay, so we're gonna dance carefully around this one, and without getting personal or into party politics, either here in the United States or in Israel, where we see that the political situation is, let's just say, messy. How does the perceived lack of strong political leadership in Israel and the United States trickle down among all ages of Jewish leaders, and how do we compensate for that?
Well, I think that if we could condense all of the leadership of American Jewry into one person, imaginary person, I think that person, their main challenge would be the volatility that is coming out of Israel. It's not about right-wing or left-wing, although a far-right party is a very big problem for American Jewry, but it's just the political instability in Israel over the last few years that makes it very, very difficult to work with the Israeli government or with the institutions. It also consumes so much energy from Israelis who are dealing with constant elections, 4 cycles of elections within 2 years, and even before that. So to me, the issue is not this government or the other government. For me, the issue is the volatility and the instability of the political system that actually is like a fact of life for that imaginary American leader that needs to, American Jewish leader that needs to kind of think about, he or she, they need to think about the future of the community here, its well-being and its long-term security. I do want to connect, though, to the fact that American Jewry, we have to acknowledge, I think, as Israelis, that the State of Israel is a joint project. It's a JV, it's a joint venture between World Jewry and Israel. I can say with confidence that without World Jewry, there would not have been the State of Israel. And this is not something that you learn about in Israel. If you come out of an Israeli school, you think that we did it on our own. But really, it has been a joint venture. And the State of Israel without World Jewry is like the wheel of the car without air. Because of World Jewry, Israel has 100 times more diplomacy than a country its size. It has 100 times more economic ties than a country in similar size. It has sports, access to music, access to academics, everything you want. Israel is inflated by World Jewry in terms of its presence and in influence in the world. So for that American Jewish leader, I say, and I connect to what Talia said earlier, the most important thing is one word you said that really caught my mind. It's pride. And I don't see it. I don't see people here that are just proud of their American Jewry. Everybody outside of Israel in the last 30 years is out of Israel by choice. Anybody that wanted to move to Israel would have moved to Israel. Anybody that wants to have a second home in Israel has a second home in Israel. Everybody here is by choice. So where's the pride? Where is the pride in the legacy? Where is the pride in the destiny? Where is the confidence? And I think that it trickles down to the younger people. If they don't feel the pride coming from the top, how can they be proud? If they're not taught about the legacy of American Jewry in school, how can they know when they go into the university?
So how do we compensate for that?
So to me, this is a very touchy question. I'll try to edge around it. We need people here that stand up for America as the great diaspora of our time. American Jewry is the great diaspora of Jewish history. And we need people that stand up for that, and they can handle the fact that they're not subordinated in their thinking to what's going on in Israel. I challenge you to look at the people who are the leaders of this community in terms of the leadership of their organizations. Okay? How many statements do they speak about Israel, anti-Semitism, those two things in one category, and everything else in the other category? What's the balance here? We're not focused on our future. Okay? If you look at the leaders of the established Jewish community in America, Israel is in crisis. So I'm not, now we're in crisis. But it was before also, before October 7. In December 2022, The Economist ranked Israel as the fourth strongest economy in the world. Israel is powerful, rich, prosperous, and still. Okay? So what I'm saying is we need this pride. We need this confidence. Can I say just a couple more points? America is the greatest diaspora we have had in history. We have to know that. And there is one reason for that. Because of the federal structure. You don't like New York, you move to Philadelphia. I'm sorry, you move to Florida. You don't like Florida, you go to Texas. You don't like Texas, you go to California. In Nazi Germany, there was one police force. Here, there's 3,000 police forces. Nobody is in control of the police. This is an amazing structure for us as a people. Okay, so, I can't find strange saying that because I'm not an American. I'm an Israeli living here looking at those two sides. I'm saying, whoa, what's going on here? Where's the confidence? Where's the, let's go out there.
Let's, Len, you have a response?
Yeah, I mean, I think being Jewish is holding multiple, perhaps inconsistent ideas. And being Jewish, the fundamental principle is amiyut, is a sense of connection. But that translates into being exceptionally proud about Jews and Israel, and also being exceptionally embarrassed when Jews or Israel do things that don't look good. I mean, the obvious example is Madoff and how embarrassed we were as Jews that he was a person, but also the pride at the same time in the productivity of Americans. I also want to say, in terms of Israel and its view of the diaspora, you know, the Megillat Ha'atzmaut, the Declaration of Independence, the last part of it is about the role of the diaspora. I mean, it's the fundamental principle of the country. And then I also wanted to point out, sort of answering your question before about statistics, we have to keep some of the stuff that's going on in perspective. There's actually a very tiny group of Jewish students and Jews who are involved in anti-Israel protests. It bothers us a lot that there are. There are also a relatively small group of anti-Zionist, anti-Semites amongst at least college students. Our last study showed that amongst non-Jews, it was something like 17% hold these anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic views. And we actually know what the structure of them is. We know, if you will, where to attack the virus. And despite all of the headlines about protests and encampments and the fear is a psychological construct that it has created, a tiny, tiny group of actual students has been involved in that. So part of what we have to do is, yes, be proud, be strong, but also be ready to deal specifically with the things that are undermining our sense of unity, our sense of purpose, and our pride in being Jewish.
I want to open the floor to questions because we have just a few minutes. When you ask your question, be loud, and I've moderated a lot of panels, and I've always found that the best questions last less than 15 seconds, and they end in a question mark. So we'll start on this side. Hard to hear you. Hard to hear you.
Oh, sorry. I'm just trying to rush. So the question is, how do we build a civilization of Judaism, a Jewish culture outside of the synagogues? Because those are, it's not except for Orthodox synagogues. We're talking about a future without synagogues. Mordecai Kaplan tried it with JCCs and stuff. It didn't work. What is the future of American Judaism outside of the synagogues?
Can I suggest that we take a few questions and then all of us get to...
Okay, yeah, we'll take a few questions. It's a good idea. In the red shirt, yeah?
Yes. I understand that we're speaking about campuses, college campus, and we're supporting our 600 students from a solid foundation. But my question is, we have some adolescents in the middle. And so how are we entering secular schools and high schools to support the students that are really kind of in the middle and they're drowning? And personally, I just sent my child to Israel from Ahmed because he couldn't keep in school. How are we supporting that movement of those secular public communities where our kids are just absorbing or suffering and they're not quite at that lower end where you can build that solid foundation and they don't quite have the sophistication of a college student to be able to navigate this world. There's sort of this no man's land for kids right now. We need support with that. So how can we support us in that?
And in the back? All right, that's a great question, actually. That's a really great one. So I have three questions here. One is, how do we supplement the synagogues? What do we do for the adolescents that might be falling through the cracks, particularly those in public school settings? And then also, where would we invest if we had one place? I'll do quick round here. Maybe start on the other end. We'll start with Aya.
All right. So I want to answer the question about the teens. So I started by saying that we start at a very young age, and I do think you're absolutely right. You can't just go to the college kids. So the foundation and the backbone is the young age where they're still kids, and the teen years are the years to start experimenting as leaders, but not also only as leaders. As Len said, we need followers as well, and good followers, because otherwise the leaders cannot do anything. So I think it is about programming for them and finding the right ways to create the programs for them. And I want to suggest to all of you to go to the teens like corridor and to see. We have escape rooms. One escape room is about anti-Semitism, one escape room is about anti-Zionism, and they are here to show it to you, but we actually take them to schools. And not to private school. We take them to public schools, and what we also do is we train teachers. We train teachers about anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. And the first time I saw my team member actually doing the training, I thought she was joking. I said, it's so basic, it doesn't look good. And she said, well, come to the lecture and you will see how this basic is not basic at all. They don't know what I'm talking about. So those are the two things. It's not just the kids, it's also how do we get to the teachers. And we train teachers in public schools now exactly to create this a safer space for students. And I want to let others speak too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only question I'm really qualified to answer is the last one. And it's a really difficult question. If you had to invest in one Jewish organization, which would it be? And the reason it's such a difficult question is because there are so many incredible Jewish organizations that have so much overlap. And it's something that I think college students have a really hard time with, because out of everything, what do you go for? Who do you turn to for help when everyone has the answer? And I think the answer shouldn't be one particular organization to name drop. It should be something that is community building and identity enforcing.
Okay.
I think something that was more of a community building and identity enforcing type organization.
So actually, thank you for really setting the stage for what I'd like to say. I think that, in my view, the single most important investment we have to make is in people knowing and being able to embrace the legacy of the Judaism and civilization. I think this is the most important tool we have for the coming decades. For the reasons that I explained, I believe that the narrative of the Holocaust as a galvanizing narrative and also the narrative of Israel as a narrative are in decline. So this is a huge kind of pivot that we could make. I want to point out that we already have a rabbi that has written extensively about this and unfortunately passed away 4 years ago, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Saxe. Please read his books. Cover to cover, there's a whole bookshelf of them. And he gives us the ideology. He left us with the tools to be able to contend with the 21st century. And it's his life's work. 30 years of writing, relentless, publishing a book every year. Incredible legacy. The third point I want to say is that if you believe in American Jewry, to the gentleman's comment or not, it's in you. But if you don't believe, you're paralyzed. If you believe, you can charge. I would rather err on the wrong belief than err on the wrong disbelief. This is my approach. And I hope that it makes sense to you.
So this will be a surprise based on my earlier comments, but I think the best investment is in experiential education. It is the only one in the case of birthright about which we have any actual data. We have data that people who went in the first 10 years, we now have the latest data, le Dor Vador, that the children of the Bogrei Taglit, the children of participants compared to similar non-participants, are 100% more likely to celebrate bar bat mitzvah on measures of Jewish identity, Achavat Yisrael, extraordinary. I think other kinds of experiential education, Jewish summer camps, all sorts of opportunities to build the sense of connection of young Jews. We actually have evidence that this makes a difference.
I want to take the last word here. Myself, a birthright participant, one of the early birthright participants. Actually got engaged on a birthright trip. You can read about that. Going to ICCs in public school, doing the afternoon Hebrew schools, participating a bit in NCSY, helped leading me on my journey to Yeshiva University, where I met Zionist friends who had graduated from the IDF. All led me then to get into media. I do want to do a little plug here for JNS, Jewish News Syndicate. I do think that if you look at how people are digesting information today on social media, it's very important that they have sources that they can go to for good information. And these platforms can also be used to express the types of ideas that we talked about today. You know, if we want to teach people what they need to do, sometimes you have to reach them where they are, right? And so you have to use the tools, and I think that mainstream media is unfortunately not doing the good job, so we have to look to good media vessels like JNS in order to do that. I do want to also just conclude with one idea, and I know that we're all so torn up about what's going on in Israel, and we saw last night, you know, dealing with the families of the wounded and those that were killed and the hostages. I think one of the things that's being missed in all of this is that we've now sent over 300,000 young and older soldiers into battle where they faced evil face to face, where they've been shot at and shot at others, and they've been hardened in a way that perhaps Israeli society was getting soft. And the same thing on the campuses, where students were not challenged directly, now all of a sudden challenged, and they've been forced to face the fire. And I really do believe that we are, through our new experience, which is an experience that we didn't want, actually training an entire new generation of Jewish leaders, Jewish military leaders, Jewish political leaders, new Jewish entrepreneurs to tackle the challenges that are going to face up in the decades to come. So thank you all of you for joining us today.